Welcome to Beauty of Colors podcast, Jocelyn Jones. It's great to have you on the show.
Thank you. Very good to be here.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about you and what's your driving force in writing your book? What was the main purpose of writing your book?
Okay. Well, Clean, I grew up in an artist colony. So I grew up with a lot of artists, and I was surrounded by them at the dinner table, the greatest painters and dancers and actors really of that time in this little secluded artists community. And I was very interested from childhood, like what made them happy when they were happy, and sometimes they were not happy, and why was that? And my father was an actor, so I also clocked, when he was working, he was lit, and we'd go to restaurants and the theater and have a great time. And when he wasn't working, the sky had fallen. And then, my mom remarried a writer. And so then there were painters at the table because he worked in the art world. And then there were dancers at the table, and they were all at the top of the food chain. I would look at these people, and when they were working, they were lit from within. And when they weren't working, they were, kind of caved and depressed. And so I recognize that as, people call it inspiration, people call it the muse, but when they were working and they were connected to a kind of a higher force, because sometimes they were working and they didn't like the job and they weren't connected to a higher force and they were not lit from within. But sometimes they were lit from within, and you could tell they were connected to their work. They understood why they were artists. It was a calling. And I wanted to know what that was all about. And I wanted to know, can you, bring that up on a dime? Can you order that up? Can we rise to the occasion of inspiration with our will or with some techniques? So that was my childhood. Then I became an actor. I acted for a while. I can't tell you I loved the life of it. I loved acting. I loved creating a character like crazy. And I had trained with the best people ever. I trained with Sandy Meisner in those days. Sandy Meisner and Lee Strasberg were it. And so I was a trained actor, and I understood technique, and I understood how to bring these things into myself and kind of capture that, so beyond just the words or the feelings or the behavior, at some point, something starts talking to you, almost like another being, and you enter the character and the character enters you, and you're kind of flying. And I loved that. But I did not like the life. I did not like auditioning. I did not like being judged. I did not like the hours of dedication and preparing for a part, and then maybe you don't get that part. So I knew there was a teacher in me. Teaching is a calling. You kind of know that eventually you're going to do that. And so when in my 30s, I became pregnant. I mean, I wanted to be pregnant. We got pregnant, my husband and I. And I was so happy. And I thought this is the perfect time to kind of ease out of my acting career and go into a teaching career. And so I started to teach. I taught for 30 years, and I taught people who'd never set foot on stage, and they continue. I mean, I have students who've studied with me 20, 30 years. So I sort of help them create their whole careers. So I had students who'd never set foot on stage who then, had their own series. And then, word got out, and I started working for some movie stars. I've worked with, Academy Award winners. I've worked with, Academy Award winning actor is a little different than a movie star. A movie star is something else. They're magnetic. And they're usually untrained. So they would hire me because I would show them what they were doing that was right, because they would sort of admit to me that they were very insecure because they didn't quite know why they were movies or what this was all about. So I was able to say, you have a magnetism, don't worry about it. You're doing many, many things right. So yes, there is technique, but you don't apply technique when the thing is running beautifully, you don't apply technique. But there are some things I want to point out what you're doing right, so you know that every single time you create a part, look, you do these series of things. Now we're going to add these series of things and make it a little deeper. So I did that for a long time. And that led to writing, because it turned out I was a very good script doctor. So I was doing a lot of script doctoring. And, I can't talk about those people because you sign NDA, and I can't talk about those projects because you sign NDA. But it was a big part of my life, and that led to this book, because when it came time to write a book, I didn't just want to write an acting technique book. I didn't want to do that, because now we're going to switch to this side of my life. When I was a little girl and studying those artists, I was very lonely. I was very disconnected, and I didn't feel that anybody saw me. My parents were artists. They kind of put their kids on the planet, and then, you were on your own. They weren't terribly interested in you. I went to a lot of schools. I didn't find teachers that I thought really cared. I had some friends whose parents really cared about their children, and were raising a whole bunch of kids, and it didn't matter how much money you had. They loved them up, and they were interested, and they came to the table, and what's going on in your world, and what happened, and I thought, that's the way it's supposed to be. But my refuge, my love, was in nature, and nature to me was spirit. Nature to me was God. And I lived in the country, and I would go out and play in the woods and the trees, so I don't want to get too, Walt Disney about it, but I've had a real communion with nature, with spirit. So when I went to write this book, I don't want to just write about actors. I wanted to write about spirit. I wanted to write about that place that exists within all of us, and that was the same thing that artists reached for. It was true that artists, they come on the planet and they have a calling toward art, and they want to paint, or they want music. A lot of artists, we look and we say, oh, that's an artist. But my contention, after teaching technique for a long, long time now, I believe, that there's an artist in all of us. And our first masterpiece is our life. And so the book is really about how I use acting technique, the same technique that I use to help all of those actors, I use for people. So I tell the stories where I learned that lesson. Then I talk about how I use and applied that lesson with actors. And then I have exercises to show you how you can apply those same lessons to your own life, thereby elevating it, thereby connecting you to your own heart and your own point of view about things. So if you took yourself as an example, somewhere in you, you decided you wanted to be a podcaster, and you made that happen. And are you having a good time?
Actually, I am. It was tough, but I was determined, and I put in that courage, and I said I'm going to do it. And that's one of the things that I just went out there, and I didn't put a time limit on it. I just said, that's it.
Yeah. So you had a vision, you had a dream, you had an inkling.
Mhm.
That's in your imagination. Imagination is everything. So we imagine ourselves in a certain way. And in the book, I talk about the difference between imagination and fantasy. So, fantasy is, when you want somebody else's career. Actors are always say, what do you want? Because this is the most important question. What do you want? If you could have anything in the world, barring all obstacles, what would it be? That's a hard question for people to answer in this day and age, because there's a lot of noise. There's a lot of media noise and things that pull our attention, and time spent on reels, and we don't listen to ourselves. We're not educated to it. So, when you quiet down and you imagined yourself podcasting, and then and I'm sure you didn't realize it was a little harder than you thought. It's
Yeah.
always harder than we think. You think, oh, I can imagine it. I should be able to be there. And they go, oh no, here's, 65 hurdles you're going to have to, jump. But my students, I'd say, what do you want? And they go, I want to work with the best actors and the best directors on the best scripts. And they go, that, like, and I go, like who? And they go, like, whatever star, like Tom Cruise.
Mhm.
And I go, okay, but he already has his career. What's yours look like? The fantasy is when you are dreaming of having somebody else's life. I want a life like, but imagining your own from your desire, from your heart. I want this thing. I have this impulse. It starts with an impulse, right? One day you had a thought, you saw a podcast, you went, I could do that. I'd like to do that. I like to talk to people. So then you made it happen and you stuck with it. You had courage and you stuck with it. That has to do with your happiness level, you know. So part of what I do in the book, can I show the book?
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. Hmm.
Here's the book, Artist, Awakening the Spirit Within.
Hmm.
Has things in it, exercises. I don't know if they're in there, but that's the book. And it, we show people how to raise their joy level, or I show people, because with actors, Colleen, I used to, I would, when they were sad, they come and they were like a sad sack. They come to the class, they're all, I go, I can't look at that face. And plus the fact you're not going to get hired. Nobody says, I want the sad person. Let me hire that sad person. So I would say next week you have to bring me a list of 10 things that make you happy, that bring you joy. 10 things next week. Give me the list. So this one guy gave this list to, he had been a big television star on a series that went 7 years, and then the series is over. And then they're kind of like, they do other series, but it's not that series. It's rare to get a series that goes 7 seasons, right? So he had been this big television star and he couldn't quite recapture that. And he was feeling sorry for himself. So I said, joyless. So the next week he went, Jocelyn, that was really hard. I go, okay, well, let me have it. So he gave me the list. He had one thing on it, golf. I go, okay, good, golf. Did you play golf this week? He did. I did. I go, good. Next week, I want you to do this exercise. I want you to go back through your life, through childhood, and look at the things that brought you joy. Did you like gardening with your mom? Did you like cooking with your grandmother? Did you like baseball? Did you like throwing pottery? Were there things that you remember? I was really happy doing that. And he goes, okay. So the next week he came back, he had 5 more. And one of them was baseball, he liked to play baseball. So I said, well, this next week you're going to join a baseball league. They have them all over the place. So he joined a softball league and he was having a blast. And his tone level came up. And then I could say, what do you want? And he'd say, I want another series. And I go, well, what would it look like if you had your own series? Ask these questions and imagine. And I swear to you, in about 6 months, he now has a new, very big series.
Oh,
Really talking about this, but he's on a big series and he's been on it for about 3 or 4 years. I don't know. And it looks like it could go on. So he's happy enough.
that's nice.
But as you bring your level of joy up, there
Mhm.
is more possibility, in life and in the world.
Okay. One thing you said in your book, you said turn off all the noise, ignore all the influences, connect to your own inner truth. The law of attraction is real. We are what we believe. I love this. And that's a deep message. Can you elaborate a little bit more about this?
Well, I can. I don't know you. Are you fairly spiritual? Because I'm going to go into the land of spirit now.
Go ahead.
But I believe that we're spiritual, beings. We're energetic beings in bodies. And in the book, I have a lot of very old, simple, old practices. Like
Mhm.
10 minutes of meditation will allow you to separate from your personality, your ego, which is not necessarily a bad thing. Our personalities and egos, it's how we're separate. You have yours and I have mine, and you have your body and I have my body. And it is true, we're all one and we can all experience it that way. But we're here, as spiritual beings in bodies to experience consciousness. And right now on the planet, is consciousness is rising. And you see it all over the place. People are doing podcasts so that we can talk about it more, because people want to engage in this conversation. So this book is really about raising consciousness one person at a time, by having them listen to their own heart, their own thoughts, because we're all being guided by our higher selves. All we have to do is quiet down and listen. And one of the best ways to do that is through meditation, or, go out in nature. When you lie down under a tree and you look up through the branches and just breathe into your heart, it's like going to church. For me, that is like going to church. I also like to go to church. Anyway, so when you quiet and you connect like that, and you ask yourself, what do I want? What am I here for? What is my contribution? We all have a little bit different contribution, and you connect to that. Then you just need it. Once you connect to it, it will tell you what your goals are. Oh, well, you're going to need this. You're going to need a good microphone. You're going to need a space. It starts telling you these goals you need to meet. And then the goals then tell you the steps that you need to take. So if you have the goal of a good microphone, you have to research microphones. You have to find out the best place to buy it, So there's these steps. So life is really very simple. You can run your own life by dream it. Then, oh, these are the goals I'm going to need to make. Oh, these are the steps that there's an exercise in the book. These are the steps I'm going to need to take to meet this goal, to have this piece of myself that I can contribute to life. This is why I'm here on the planet. This is my artistry, is to create a life in resonance with my own heart. Now, to go to law of attraction, which you brought up, if we have a goal, and then we have a lot of psychology about that goal. Well, I can't do it. I can't be an actor. My father was an actor. I can't do this because of that. I have this wound. I have this problem. I have these things. And we think about those things. We're in those things. We're sunk in those things. We can't lift out into our joy. Then those considerations that we have at that lower vibrational level are going to bring in the same thing in kind, because we're energetic beings, and energy attracts energy. So we're creating our lives moment by moment by our thoughts, whether we're aware of it or not. So the more aware of it we become, and the more we can practice being a little more in control of our own thoughts. So, this is another reason I use actors, as an example, because when an actor cries, in their life, they have some big drama, and trust me, actors have lots of big dramas. They have some big drama and they're crying. What do? They run to the mirror to look and see what that looks like.
Oh, okay.
So that's the artist in them. That's not the ego. The ego's having, another person that's not an actor is so deeply in that trauma. They can't look at it. They are that trauma. But actors, because they are artists and they're floating in a slightly higher vibration, they'll separate out from the emotion as a being, and they'll go, look at that. What does that look like? Look at all that emotion. That's interesting. That's all we're training you to do. You can always make that separation out, no matter how traumatic. If you train yourself, you can go, oh boy, I'm really crying. Wow, that really hurts. And you acknowledge it. In order to let it go, you have to acknowledge it. But who's acknowledging it? Not the person who's having the drama. You are acknowledging it, really you. The energetic being created bodies. We created bodies with all of this sensory equipment, including emotions, in order to have experiences. And we've been a little trapped in that. And now we're lifting out and we're going, yeah, we can have all those experiences, but we can also be in charge of them. And we can also raise a level up, because we are at a time in history now where we need some inspiration. And that inspiration comes from artists. It has only ever been artists who have changed the condition of man by inspiring them.
Wow, I love this.
Yeah.
So, why do you think it's important to frame affirmations? Because affirmations is kind of like a big part of it, because you want to say things to yourself to believe that what you're saying to yourself is the truth. So, what do you think is important about this framing affirmations?
I think it's about what we're talking about. It's about changing your own mind frame. It's about changing your own energy. So
Mhm.
just like affirmations are reminding you of your a higher position. So you may feel kind of depressed, but then if you do a meditation or you do some meditation will separate you from your depression so you can look at it. Affirmations will remind you of a higher place where you have existed and you can go right now. So gratitude, gratitude is another one. If you just, some people call it prayer. Prayer is meditation. So you can pray, you can meditate on what you're grateful for, and your heart will immediately go higher up to joy because gratitude and joy are hand in hand. So we can change where we are. We can lift our own vibration into our natural state, what I call our natural state, which is the energetic being who just loves being here and having all these games and experiences, good and bad.
Mm. This is this is so nicely said. It's like I'm learning a lot from what you're saying.
Oh,
That's a positive and that's a good thing because I'm like, yeah, everything you're saying is just in sync to everything that, I read from your book and everything that I'm trying to kind of change in my life and do in my life. So who is the book for?
the book is for anyone who's seeking to have a better life, to have a more spiritual life, to have a more artful life. Um, it's a teaching memoir. It's different than a memoir because it has my stories, which are memoir, but at the heart of it, I'm a teacher. But here's the thing about teaching, because you just were such a beautiful example of it. You can't teach anybody anything. The problem with teachers, and particularly acting teachers, is they become gurus and people, it's all this altitude. I'm not into altitude. Nobody should have altitude over anybody. All a teacher does is they tell, if you didn't already know the things that I am saying, you wouldn't recognize them. So when you just said, oh, this is so nice, and you flashed it, you have the most beautiful smile I've ever seen in my life. It's just like,
Thank
oh
you.
my God,
Thank
what a
you.
smile. And that's because I touched your heart in a place you already know that. That's what great teaching is, because it makes it allows people to move a little faster. That's what the book is about. They move a little faster. So yeah, if you're someone seeking to have, more control over your life, to have a life from your own heart, if guidance from your higher self, if you believe there's something out there that you should be doing and you haven't been able to figure out what it is, this will give you a series of exercises everywhere from speaking. You have journaling exercises where you go in conversation with the child in you, because the child has a lot of information. So there are lots of, I don't think every exercise is for every person, but that's the same with teaching. I give exercises and I give techniques. They all learn all of them. But this, you would love these three. I work with these two. This person likes all five all the time, whatever it is. We're different.
It's true.
Yeah.
And what's the best piece of advice that you could give to someone, the listeners, in writing their own story?
Listen to yourself. Listen to your heart. Believe that you are guided. Nobody can tell you anything that you don't already know in your heart. And this is very important. Exercise your imagination. We have no education in this country anymore. We took out the arts. And when you take out imagination, the arts, you take out imagination. When you take out imagination, you take out ability. You take out a person being able to think for themselves. you take out possibility, you take out discovery. If you can't imagine, you can't discover, you can't, you take out greatness. When you take out imagination, you take out greatness. So we have to give that back to ourselves. The best exercise ever for imagination is reading. So all of this noise keeps us from reading. You can listen to stories, on Audible, you can read books. But the reason we have problems with illiteracy and people don't want to read is because they're not exercised in the area. But when you read, you create the pictures in your head, you imagine it. So when you listen to a story and I listen to a story, two movies are being made, one in your head, one in my head. This is imagination. When you're delivered pictures, in the movies, I like them as much as everybody, movies and television and all these screens, then we get lazy and we expect life to be delivered to us. We have to get back to participating in life and exercising our imagination.
Mm.
And we can dream of a new future.
So imagination is everything. It's somebody said it's the preview to life's coming attractions.
Oh, that's beautiful. Einstein talked about imagination.
Yeah, it was him. Yeah, he said.
Einstein. Yeah. He has like 10 things about, the importance of imagination. Otherwise we're just robots. We're just becoming the AI that we're use every day.
Yeah, that is true. And where can the listeners get a copy of your book?
You can get a copy of my book on Amazon.
Mhm.
And should I give you my other details where you
Yeah,
can?
sure. Yeah.
So you can get a copy of the book. Here it is. I'm new to this self-promotion. There's the book, Artist Awakening the Spirit Within. It's on Amazon.com. I have a website that also talks about, I have a 15-part acting class coming out. We just picture locked it. So it's going to be a class that I taught, a master class, an 8-week master class. I taught these very advanced actors, and they're beautiful. They're beautiful. I'm very excited. But you can find out about more on JocelynJonesStudio.com. And also on Instagram, Jocelyn Jones Studio. You have pictures of all the actors there and lots of quotes from the book. And yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
Okay, sounds good. Is there any last words that you would like to say to the listeners of encouragement? I think everything you said is of encouragement.
Yeah, I think the fact that the listeners are listening to this show right now, they're seeking. And if they're listening to us, they're listening to other things. They're reading other things. When that occurs, I think we're shifting. I think we're shifting from a society that learned by problems. We have these problems and we overcome the problems and then we've learned. Now we're shifting to a more conscious society where we can dream what we want, we can see programs like this. And when we're on the right track, there's something called synchronicity. And so, a bird comes and taps on the window. That's a sign. That's how the universe talks to you, because if it talks to you with a voice, you're going to think you're nuts. But if it leaves you little feathers and coins on the ground that you suddenly notice, if you suddenly notice that you looked at a tree and the wind came up and it was as if the tree waved at you, then you're on the right track.
Sounds good. Well, thank you so much, Jocelyn, for being on Beauty of Colors podcast. It was a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to be here, Queen.